We are looking back at the single most transformative, chaotic, and frankly, unexpected year in the history of Pokémon Go.
It was a true roller coaster.
Absolutely. The year, everything changed, starting with a corporate bombshell and ending with completely new ways to play the game.
It really felt like two separate games coexisted in 2025. I mean, when you look at the financials, the game managed to stabilize its revenue remarkably well.
Right.
We're seeing estimated figures somewhere between, say, $545 and $558 million for the year.
Yeah.
And that shows just immense durability.
But stability isn't the same as standing still, is it?
Not at all. The depth of the game just skyrocketed. Complexity was layered on top of complexity, and I think most crucially, the pressure to engage daily and spend frequently became, well, it became systemic.
That structural change is exactly what we're here to unpack. That's our mission today. We're going to dig into that seismic shift. Everything from the new Scopely ownership and the community's reaction to it through the hugely divisive max battle system.
Oh, yeah.
The progression path, jumping from level 50 all the way to 80, the introduction of IV fixing with hyper training, and of course the long-awaited arrival of remote trading.
It's a lot to cover.
It is. We need to dissect the substance from the spectacle and figure out if, on balance, all these changes ultimately left you, the dedicated player, in a better, more rewarding, or just a more expensive position going into 2020.
We're really separating the content that brought long-term fun from the features that felt, explicitly engineered for short-term revenue.
And it's all intertwined.
Completely. And to understand any of it, the only place to start is with that corporate shift.
Absolutely. So let's not wait another second. We have to start with the bombshell that rocked the entire gaming world back in March of 2025, the sale of the game itself.
The $3.5 billion question.
Exactly. That defined the first half of the year. In March, Niantic, the original architects, the pioneers of the whole AR genre, they announced they were selling Pokémon GO.
And there are other licensed AR titles, too.
Right. And the buyer, Scopely.
Huh?
A global mobile game publisher famous for titles like Monopoly Go and Marvel Strike Force.
And backed by the massive financial power of Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, Savvy Games, this wasn't just a simple change of management. It was Niantic effectively splitting itself in two. The profitable licensed games went to Scopely, while the original Niantic entity, renamed Niantic Spatial Inc., shifted its focus entirely.
To what exactly?
To high-end geospatial AI and spatial intelligence. The message was pretty clear. One company was focused on the tech, and the other was focused on the cash engine.
And the player reaction was not measured. It was instantaneous, total panic.
Visceral is the word that comes to mind.
Absolutely. The moment the news broke, the community just went into crisis mode. We saw frantic organizing on Reddit.
What were they doing? Users were campaigning, sending letters directly to the Pokémon company in Japan, essentially begging them to veto the deal, or at least intervene to make sure the game's core ethos wasn't, corrupted.
And that panic was best summarized by what I remember being called the Great Pokémon Migration.
Yes, the insurance transfer. Players weren't just storing their Pokémon at home.
No, they were moving their best stuff.
They were transferring their precious, shiny, high IV legacy move monsters out of Pokémon Go because they genuinely feared that the new management would implement changes so aggressive that those assets would be permanently devalued.
Or locked behind some new paywall.
Exactly. And that fear was fueled by the reputation that preceded Scopely, right?
Oh, absolutely. I remember the warnings.
Scopely titles, particularly Marvel Strike Force, are known in the mobile space for extremely aggressive, high-frequency monetization practices. So veterans of those games, they immediately flooded the forums with warning. Expect relentless daily offers, predatory pricing on essential items, and a shift toward mechanics that fundamentally require spending to stay competitive.
The big fear was pay to win.
That was the specific warning, that pay-to-win systems would be implemented right into the core PvP structure of the game.
So, given this disastrous start in terms of public perception, how did Scopely handle the integration once the deal officially closed in May? I mean, they had a massive PR fire to put out.
They played it perfectly, at least in the short term. They executed a very smart, very targeted PR strategy that was all about continuity and commitment.
So, reassuring the player base.
Precisely. They announced immediately that the entire development team, the designers, the engineers, the people who actually run the servers, was staying put under the new corporate banner.
And I remember key figures provided some very specific assurances.
They did. Key directors, like Michael Steranka, personally issued reassurances to the community, directly addressing the biggest fears.
What was the main promise?
Steranka's specific quote became the mantra of that whole period. He explicitly stated that intrusive ads or the implementation of energy systems.
The kind that gate content behind timers unless you pay.
Right. He said that would happen not now, not ever in Pokémon GO.
Now, that provided verbal relief, sure. But more importantly, Scopely immediately backed up those words with concrete policy changes.
Yes, and these changes addressed long-standing, really bitter community grievances. This is where the short-term benefit became really clear.
What was first on the list?
The list of immediate quality of life improvements was actually pretty significant. First, the remote raid daily limit, which had been capped at 5, was doubled to 10 per day.
That was huge for accessibility. Huge. Especially for players in smaller communities or, those with mobility issues. Doubling that limit instantly eased a ton of frustration.
It really did. And second, and this was just as important, was accessibility to the new challenging content.
You're talking about shadow raids and the new max battles.
Exactly. Both were opened up for remote participation, which had previously been restricted to local-only groups.
Which, again, helps anyone who can't reliably gather 20 people in their local park.
Right, and critically, the game's operational communication improved dramatically. I remember in the final months under the old management, event schedules would sometimes drop literally hours after the event had already started.
Oh, I remember that. It was chaos.
Under Scopely's first official season, that communication pipeline just cleaned up immensely. Monthly event schedules were released much, much earlier.
And that transparency, coupled with the faster bug fixes we'll talk about later, was probably the single most acknowledged positive improvement of the whole year.
I think so. As Andrew Ross noted, the game was in a slightly better spot under Scopely this season than it was under Niantic last.
That makes that $545 million revenue figure even more interesting, because that number is roughly half of the game's peak.
Yeah, the billion-dollar revenue years during the 2020-2021 pandemic bubble. So that $545 million is a success, but only in the context of stabilizing after a massive post-pandemic decline.
Right.
They achieved that financial stabilization while integrating all these new mechanics, but here's the tension that really defined the rest of 2025.
Which is?
Even with better communication and quality of life, the community still wrestled with monetization fatigue. Players felt that while the old game loop was safe, catching Pokemon while you walk, every new system, every major progression path felt strategically engineered to create spending friction.
It's the difference between feeling like you can buy something to speed up progress and feeling like the core game loop is actively preventing progress unless you pay.
That's it, exactly. And that brings us perfectly into the biggest mechanical change of 2025, which introduced that spending friction right onto the map itself.
If 2024 was the year of shadow raids, then 2025 will go down in history as the year of the power spot.
Without a doubt. The introduction of Dynamax and Gigantamax forms from Generation 8 was a total structural overhaul of the map and the PvE endgame.
This was the major attempt to revitalize a raid scene that had, let's be honest, grown a little stale.
It had. The fundamental infrastructure change was the introduction of these power spots. They were new, prominent locations, totally distinct from gyms and Pokestops, visible on the map with these glowing energy effects.
So these power spots were the exclusive home for max battles. What made them different from the landmarks we were used to?
They were dynamic. Unlike a gym, which is a fixed location, power spots would shift, appear, and disappear over time.
Often tied to events, right?
Right, tied to event rotations or regional pulses of energy. And this functionally forced players to remap and re-explore their local environment constantly.
Which is great for the core AR philosophy.
It is, but it immediately introduced a new resource requirement that just fueled all that monetization critique we were just talking about.
The max particle, or MP.
Yes, the max particle economy. This quickly became one of the most controversial elements of the year.
How did you earn these particles? For anyone who might not know.
There were two main free-to-play methods. First, you earned a moderate amount of MP just by walking. It was 300 MP for every 2-kilometer walked, so it was tied into Adventure Sync.
Okay.
Second, visiting and interacting with a power spot gave you a small trickle, maybe 100 to 120 MP per visit. But the key to the controversy was the caps.
This is where the spending engineering became visible for everyone to see.
Precisely. The daily MP collection limit were strictly capped at 800 MP, and your wallet cap was set at a really low 1000 MP, which prevented any significant long-term hoarding.
Though they did increase it during big events like GoFest.
Occasionally, yeah. But that bottleneck was immediately labeled as retention hacking.
And the math supported the anger, did.
It did. A top-tier, high-difficulty Gmax raid could easily cost 300 MP just to enter. So if you needed to try it 2 or 3 times to coordinate a clear and you missed a single day of walking or collecting, you probably couldn't afford the next high-tier battle.
The cap actively prevented players from saving up for a weekend raid session.
And it forced them into daily engagement just to progress.
But couldn't the developers argue that the cap was necessary? I mean, maybe for anti-botting or just to prevent burnout. If a dedicated player bought 50,000 MP, they could blow through all the content in a single weekend and then maybe quit the game.
That's the nuance the community wrestled with, for sure. It's plausible the caps were a long-term retention measure to pace content, but the optics were just terrible. Because the primary overflow mechanism, the way to bypass the cap, was the shop. If you hit your free collection cap but wanted to keep raiding, you had to buy the max particle bundles.
And these bundles were not cheap.
Not at all. Data suggests that completing a high-difficulty Gmax cycle required about $5 to $7 worth of purchase max particles if you were starting from 0 or had missed a few days of collecting.
So it engineered frustration and then offered a premium solution.
Exactly.
Let's talk about the battles themselves, because mechanically, they were designed to fix that long-standing problem of traditional raids just being mindless tapping.
And they did. Max battles were fundamentally cooperative and strategic. Instead of just spamming your strongest charged moves, players focused on building a max meter using fast attacks.
And once the meter was full,
The Pokemon Dynamaxed for 3 turns, unlocking specialized moves that fit strictly into a sort of trinity of roles.
so no more public lobbies full of random attackers. You actually needed specialized roles.
Absolutely. The roles were very clearly defined. You had the tank, using Max Guard to deploy a massive shield, which could save the entire team from a near-wipe attack.
Okay, so a tank.
Yeah.
What else?
Then you had the healer, who used Max Spirit or Max Aura, which restored a percentage of the entire team's HP. Absolutely crucial for sustaining those long fights.
And finally, the attacker.
Right, the pure DPS role just focused on maximizing damage within that 3-turn Dynamax window.
How did they manage to make players actually stick to those roles in a public lobby where communication is basically non-existent?
Well, it was imperfect, but the mechanics really incentivized it. The boss fight literally became impossible at higher tiers without coordinated shielding and healing.
So if everyone just went pure attack,
You were guaranteed to wipe. If 3 people went pure attack against a Gmax Snorlax, you'd wipe by the second shield phase, easy.
Yeah.
It forced a level of coordination and strategic depth that traditional raiding just completely lacked.
people developed silent signals.
The best players did, yeah.
Yeah.
Based on when they deployed their max move. And we have to emphasize the scale of the difficulty here.
These weren't your average 5-star raids.
Not even close. Gigantamax bosses, like that early Gmax Snorlax or the event-limited Eternamax Eternatus, were monstrous. They had HP pools that were comparable to the old 7-star Elite raid.
How many players did you need?
Often, you needed the sustained DPS of up to 40 local players for a reliable clear, especially if you were trying to hit a time bonus.
40 players. That's a social requirement that automatically excludes a huge portion of the player base.
It did. If you were playing in a remote area or even a typical suburb with low population density, lobbies of 3 to 5 players would just consistently fail against these bosses.
Making the entire feature feel functionally inaccessible.
For many, yes. And the cost to even unlock a max move was punishing, which created a really high barrier to entry even for veterans.
How punishy are we talking?
Unlocking a max move level 3 required a massive resource sink. 1,800 max particles, 150 standard candy, and 40 candy XL.
So this was not content for casual players.
Yeah, not at all. And what's more, it completely devalued previous investment. A level 50 Shadow Machamp, which was the pinnacle of fighting type power, was completely ineligible for max battles.
You had to build whole new teams from scratch.
Exactly, forcing trainers to spend resources that were already scarce. So that urban versus rural divide, a long-standing core problem for the game.
It wasn't solved by max battles.
It was aggressively exacerbated. The power spot system, because it was so dynamic, was hard to track, and the reliance on massive player density meant that for rural trainers, the investment in particles and passes was often just completely wasted.
It deepened that feeling that all the best new content was designed exclusively for dense metropolitan areas.
Precisely.
So if the sale defined the business and max battles defined the content, the progression system was completely redefined by the level 80 cap.
It was.
For 5 years, level 50 was the ceiling. In the fall, that cap shattered. raising the trainer level ceiling all the way to 80.
This was a necessity, really. The veteran player base was saturated. You had millions of trainers hitting level 50 and just feeling like they had no macro goal left to chase.
But the implementation of the cap increase, it was a classic mixed bag.
It really was.
Let's start with the good news. What was the immediate positive?
The immediate massive relief was the removal of the arduous level up research tasks for levels 41 through 50.
Ah, yes.
So players who had already accumulated enough cumulative XP and reaching level 80 required an insane 203 million total XP. They could instantly progress into the 50s and 60s without the frustration of those old arbitrary tasks.
That sounds like a gift to the players who were stuck at level 49 because they didn't want to, win 30 raids in a week or whatever it was.
It was a huge quality of life improvement for those specific stuck players.
Yeah.
But the happiness didn't last very long.
Why not?
Because the goalposts simply moved, and the tasks were repurposed. They weren't eliminated, they were just relocated to the new high-end bracket.
So they were shifted to levels 71 through 80.
That's right. And this created a profound sense of disappointment, even betrayal, among the highest level veterans. They had already done the XP grind, and now they were faced with a new set of grinding assignments that just felt like a reset of their prior efforts.
And these were not easy tasks.
No, we're talking specific high-demand tasks here. Things like catch 500 dragon, or fairy-type Pokemon, or win 100 Go Battle League sets using only unevolved poison-type Pokemon.
Those are requirements that demand specific event participation and resource hoarding. It shifted the goal from just playing the game to playing the game exactly how the developers intended.
It made the progression track feel less like an achievement and more like mandatory homework. The new track just lacked the spontaneous discovery that made the original journey to level 40 feel so exciting.
But then came a feature that truly felt like a revolutionary quality of life win for the dedicated community: Hypertrain.
This was the min-maxer's dream, finally arriving, a long-standing request from the main series game.
So hypertraining is the feature that lets you use items bottle caps to instantly improve a Pokemon's 40 stats to a perfect 15.
Correct.
As someone who has nearly deleted the game after catching a rare, shiny legendary with terrible 2-star IVs, I can tell you this is a massive win.
It is.
It lets competitive players and collectors finally fix those mediocre IVs on rare, impossible to recatch Pokemon.
Mechanically, it is perfect. It adds massive endgame depth, but immediately we run right into the business strategy that defines 2025.
The monetization cap.
The monetization catch on the key items. At its launch during Go Fest and the Into the Wild events, the single most valuable item, the gold bottle cap, was locked exclusively behind the expensive GoPass Deluxe.
Which was priced around, what, 20 bucks?
Around $19.99, yeah. And the gold bottle cap is so valuable because it doesn't just fix one stat, it instantly boosts all 3 IV's attack, defense, HP to 15.
That is an enormous resource saving.
It saves hundreds of thousands of Stardust and potentially thousands of Candy XL. Getting a perfect 4V for a rare Pokemon suddenly became a commodity item locked behind a high paywall.
And what about the silver bottle cap?
Subsequent silver bottle caps, which boost just one stat, were also primarily paywalled through event tickets and passes.
So a perfect 4V fix was a premium product from day one, and that led to intense community frustration about accessibility.
Right. While the feature was universally praised for its utility, its implementation immediately underscored that fear that every desirable quality of life feature would now be restricted to premium players.
This strategy really highlights the emergence of the recurring GoPass system as the default monetization blueprint for 2025. This wasn't just a ticket. It was a multi-tiered battle pass system.
Exactly, tailored specifically for the game.
And the pass did include a free track, which offered some genuinely beneficial rewards.
It did, yeah. The free tracks were often praised. They offered max particles, guaranteed encounters, even small amounts of Pokecoins. It rewarded consistent daily play without spending. But the paid deluxe tracks became the constant source of community suspicion and the driving engine of FOMO fear of missing out.
Especially when they were tied to expiring power items or competitive advantages.
Precisely. For example, the Go Pass during the fall event offered a rank 100 reward of a lucky trinket.
Which was what?
A power item that provided temporary expiring bonuses to catch rates and raid reward. That temporary nature created pressure to use it immediately, forcing engagement.
And the paid holiday Go Pass offered highly tangible competitive perks.
Very tangible. Things like double raid bonuses and free legendary encounters, specifically Palkia for reaching rank 100.
So even though the pass was optional, those items created a distinct, real advantage for those who paid.
It was a successful formula, or at least a tolerable one. Scopely managed to add the complexity and progression that veteran players desperately needed. Level 80, hyper-training, while finding a way to successfully entice spending through these optional but highly desirable Go passes.
And they did it without triggering the full-scale revolt that many feared earlier in the year.
Exactly.
For all the strategic monetization, 2025 did deliver one truly amazing social feature that the community had been begging for literally since the game launched.
True remote trading.
Finally.
This was monumental, a massive feature that finally rolled out globally on December 11, 2025. It solved one of the most frustrating, long-standing limitations for international players and dedicated collectors.
But they couldn't just open the floodgates to global trading, though. How did they implement this while still maintaining the spirit of local play?
They built an entirely new structure around the highest level of friendship. They introduced a new friendship tier called Forever Friends, which sits above the existing Best Friends status.
Forever Friends. How did you get there?
It required sustained commitment, approximately 90 days of interaction, opening gifts, raiding together, battling after you had already achieved Best Friends status.
So it was slow and deliberate.
Very. Progress was tracked using a hidden metric, friendship points, making it a true relationship status in the game.
And once you hit Forever Friends, what did that unlock mechanically?
Upon reaching the tier, you and that friend unlocked a single remote trade credit.
Just one.
Just one. And the anti-hoarding measure was crucial here. You could only hold one remote trade credit at a time with each Forever Friend. Once you used it, that credit had to recharge.
How did you recharge it?
It required a new interaction, a new raid, a new gift exchange before another credit became available. It paced the system and maintained some scarcity.
And this immediately solved the problem of the lucky friend distance gap.
Eliminated it overnight.
For years, people worldwide would become lucky friends, guaranteeing a trade with high IVs, but couldn't complete it unless they physically flew across continents.
And now those high-value, guaranteed lucky trades could finally be completed remotely. This brought relief to millions of international friends who had been stuck with a list of unusable lucky status trades.
But the game still, frustratingly, doesn't have an in-game chat system. So how did trainers coordinate the actual remote trade? You can't just send a message saying, hey, want to trade that shiny Rayquaza?
They built in two key support features to mitigate that. First, they finally increased the overall friend list capacity.
From what to what?
From a restrictive 450 to a much more manageable 650 slots.
Okay.
Second, and this was a really elegant solution, they created a new wish list mechanic tied to a remote trade tag.
How'd that work?
Trainers could tag up to 3 specific Pokémon they were willing to offer, and their Forever Friends could see that list. It allowed them to coordinate the trade intention without needing to use external messaging apps like Discord or WhatsApp.
Smart. However, remote trading came with some pretty strict limitations.
Oh, yeah. To prevent exploitation or conflicts with monetization, the list of exclusions was comprehensive and tight.
What was on it?
You could not remotely trade shadow Pokemon, mythical Pokemon like Meltan or Jirachi, fused Pokemon like the Kyurem fusion,
Actively mega-evolved Pokemon.
and the newly released crown forms of Zacian and Zamazenta. It was all about preserving the sanctity of rare encounter.
And the value of the new expensive system.
Exactly. Shadow and mythical Pokemon are hard to get. Fused forms are tied to the new, expensive fusion energy system. By excluding them, they ensured that the highest value assets couldn't be instantly funneled through the remote system.
And there was a 30-day restriction on newly caught Pokemon, too.
Right, which maintained the incentive to participate in local events or specific regional catch spree. It was a brilliant, highly restrictive implementation that satisfied the demand without collapsing the game's core economic structure.
Beyond social features, late 2025 also saw technical integration with the newest console hardware, which is a big deal for collectors.
That's right. They roll out deep integration with the Nintendo Switch 2. And this was a much smoother, more stable transition than the clunky processes of the past. It allowed for faster and significantly more stable transfer of Generation 9 Pokemon, and, importantly, the massive backlog of postcards that players needed for their Vivillon.
The pace of content in 2025 was truly relentless. We saw these huge spectacles, but for many veteran players, there was a palpable feeling of event fatigue setting in, especially when we look at the Community Day review.
Community Days, or CDs, were decidedly a mixed bag this year. They drew heavy criticism for being, in the words of many competitive veterans, just Pokédex fillers that lacked any genuine meta relevance.
The feeling was that the exclusive moves were wasteful, too often.
Exactly.
Let's start on a high note, though. Which community days actually brought excitement and competitive value?
Well, the year started strong with the highly anticipated Paldea region starters.
Right.
Sprigatito's CD in January and Fuecoco's in March were universally popular, especially Fuecoco, which brought the powerful Blast Burn move to Skeledirge.
And Skeledirge, with Blast Burn, became a top fire type in Shogo Battle League.
It did. The other massive win was Jangmo, a pseudo-legendary that had been heavily requested. Its CD was highly successful and provided excellent raid and PvP value.
But then we hit that mid-year slump where the lack of creative thought became really evident. It started with that experimental dual community day.
That was the February Curveball, the first ever dual CD featuring Shelmet and Carablast, and it was widely panned.
Why?
Because the exclusive moves they received were competitively useless. Escavalier got Acid Spray, which is purely a debuff move, not the high damage coverage it desperately needed to compete in Ultra League.
And Excelgor's move was just as ineffective.
Right. It failed to make either Pokemon relevant for veterans.
And then there were the broken moves given to Pokemon that couldn't even use them properly.
Exactly, the case of Vanillite in April. The developers gave Vanillix a physically broken, powerful move avalanche. It carries the same massive stats as meta-defining legacy moves like Psystrike or Meteor Mash. But Vanillix's poor defensive typing and stats severely limited its utility in PvP. It made even a broken move somewhat irrelevant in practice. And later, Palmy CD was a competitive disaster.
Record low participation, I remember. It was labeled a total flop.
Because the Pokemon simply didn't perform. This pattern really highlighted the community's frustration with choices that just didn't matter to the competitive scene. It forced engagement for pure collection rather than power.
The only saving grace for competitive players really came in the December recap event.
Yeah, that allowed them to catch up on missed legacy moves from the past 2 years.
What were the big must-haves from that December recap that trainers had to prioritize?
2 in particular stood out for JO Battle League architects. First was Feraligatry, which finally got its classic Hydro Cannon move back.
Which was crucial because Feraligatry had already gained Shadow Claw earlier in the year.
And that combination of Shadow Claw and Hydro Cannon has kept Feraligatry stubbornly relevant in Great and Ultra. Second was Toucannon, which received Beak Blast.
An absolutely insane move.
It is. It provides high damage and reduces the opponent's attack by 1 stage, making it a critical strategic asset in competitive formats.
Moving to the big global spectacles, how did JoeFest 2025, the premier global event, measure up in this new corporate environment?
It was a technical success, but it suffered from a perception of being too simple. It felt like it was lacking the magic of past years. It introduced Necrozma in its powerful forms, Duskmane and Dawn Wings, and the innovative fusion energy economy.
Let's dedicate a moment to that fusion energy system, because this was a huge new resource. How did players earn and use it?
Fusion energy was necessary to fuse Necrozma with Solgaleo or Lunala. You primarily earned it by completing raids featuring the base forms of Necrozma.
So generous.
The system was designed generously enough that even free-to-play trainers could earn enough energy for at least 1 competitive fusion if they participated consistently. However, maximizing multiple fusion
Or using them constantly in rotation.
absolutely required the purchase of additional raid passes.
So a high-spectacle fusion Pokemon in the debut of the crown forms of Zacian and Zamazenta in Raid, but low engagement value for veteran.
That's the consensus. Longtime players felt the event was too straightforward. It was missing the random, exciting elements like unexpectedly spawning legendaries or a captivating storyline from previous years.
And the pricing held steady.
Tickets remain high at $14.99, and data suggested a major pay-to-shiny gap persisted.
What did that pay-to-shiny data show?
It showed that ticket holders saw the standard, generous event shiny rates around 1 in 64 encounters, which is what you'd expect. However, non-ticket holders reported abysmal rates that were barely above standard wild rates.
And that widening gap in accessibility for collectors fueled intense community criticism.
It suggested that the event's primary purpose was to funnel players toward the ticket purchase.
Conversely, there was one event that was almost universally cited as the year's fan favorite, the Wild Area event in November. Why did that one land so well?
The Wild Area event was fantastic because it bundled meaningful features and provided a real break from the typical catch-and-raid monotony. It introduced Mighty Pokemon.
Which was basically stat-checked content.
Exactly. Pokemon with optimized IVs became necessary for certain achievements. It pushed the game toward a hardcore casual feel. You needed the best stats alongside the right species. It's endgame progression for collectors.
But even that event had monetization controversy baked in.
It did. The Safari Ball catch rate multiplier was tied to the event ticket. Critics saw this as selling a fundamental catch rate advantage, a definite pay-to-win element.
While defenders argued it was just an accessibility feature.
Right, allowing busy or casual players to more reliably capture the difficult legendaries in the raids. Regardless, the feature bundling and the focus on stat depth made it the best global event of the year for many.
Now, for all the talk of new content, new ownership, and new progression systems, we have to talk about the persistent technical reality.
Yeah.
For all the complexity layered into the game, 2025 was plagued by some incredibly frustrating bugs that severely impacted the player experience.
It's the classic software development trade-off. As the game becomes infinitely more complex, with layered systems like max battles and GoPasses, the potential for instability doesn't just increase, it compounds.
What were the biggest persistent technical issues that trainers dealt with all year?
The usual suspects remained. We saw rampant app crashing or freezing, especially during time-sensitive moments like entering raids or trying to access your inventory.
And the old location-based bugs.
Error 11 and 12, the GPS signal errors, continued to block access to Pokestop. And perhaps most frustrating for the daily player was the persistent adventure sync malfunction, failing to register crucial steps needed for Ridley rewards and egg hatch.
And some of the bugs were so severe, they rendered the game temporarily unplayable for segments of the community.
That's where the critical pain points came from. For several days in mid-2025, a pervasive infinite login loop bug plagued a massive segment of Android users.
Just hanging at 80% loading or cycling endlessly.
Exactly. We also had specific content bugs, like the wild Pokémon fleeing bug in July, and the persistent issue with the daily adventure egg system.
Which was broken how?
It blocked the final open egg slot until the daily egg was specifically hatched, essentially preventing trainers from using their valuable super incubators efficiently.
And bugs affected the new core features too, impacting investment.
Absolutely. There were critical bugs surrounding the brand new fusion energy system. For instance, a bug prevented trainers from reliably receiving solar fusion energy after completing Duskmane Necrozma raids.
So you were wasting raid passes.
Wasting raid passes and unable to perform the legendary fusions. There was also a persistent, devastating issue where trainers would get kicked out of the max battle encounter screen after spending their MP and raid pass,
Losing both the pass and the opportunity to catch the Pokemon.
a complete waste of time and premium resources. But here's the major unexpected silver lining, and perhaps the biggest sign of the new management stabilizing the player relationship.
The developer response to these issues actually improved dramatically.
This is the one thing that earned universal praise in 2025. The speed and generosity of bug resolution under the new ownership were unprecedented. We finally saw accountability.
Like with the fleeing bug.
Exactly. When that severe wild Pokémon fleeing bug emerged in July, it was fixed and deployed globally within an hour, and 50 free Pokeballs were distributed to compensate players.
An hour fix and real compensation. That's a huge shift from the slow response times the community was used to.
And we saw it during the Ultra Unlock Raid Day, when a major, highly visible shiny rate bug occurred, a catastrophic error for a paid event. The developers provided same-day acknowledgement and compensation.
In the form of a timed research track.
Right, which offered guaranteed shiny encounters. This shift in communication and rapid response did more to rebuild trust than perhaps any single new feature.
But does a rapid fix truly compensate for the underlying instability? I mean, does giving out 50 Pokeballs excuse the continued reliance on what appears to be a highly unstable code base that keeps introducing these game-breaking errors?
That is the essential, critical question. Rapid compensation is commendable, and it addresses the immediate consumer complaint, losing an item or an opportunity. However, it doesn't solve the core engineering problem.
Right.
The community is still waiting for the day when these game-breaking bugs stop appearing altogether. 2025 proved that the new management prioritizes fixing the symptom of player dissatisfaction quickly, but the frequency of the disease, the instability, remains stubbornly high.
When we step back and look at Pokémon GO in 2025, the picture is complex, fascinating, and just fundamentally contradictory.
It is.
We have two conflicting narratives running in parallel, both equally true. On one side, bold, necessary innovation, level 80, hyper-training, the cooperative depth of Dynamax, and the long-awaited remote trading system.
These features modernized a stale endgame and gave high-level players genuine reasons to keep engaging.
And on the other side,
Systemic, always-on monetization. The GoPass system, the strict caps and paywalled access to max particles, the exclusive access to IV-fixing gold bottle caps via deluxe ticket, and just the general feeling that the game's new systems were engineered more for daily retention and extracting revenue than for spontaneous free discovery.
So what does this deeply mixed bag tell us about the future of the game?
It tells us that 2025 represented cautious but absolutely necessary structural progress. The core appeal, the unique act of catching Pokémon in the real world, that remains the game's anchor. It carries it forward even as revenue stabilized at a lower level than its pandemic peak.
And the Scopely found a formula that worked for them.
They did. They successfully found a formula for enticing spending through highly desirable yet technically optional GO passes and premium items without triggering the full community revolt that many feared when the acquisition was announced.
They added the complexity and high-stakes content that veteran players desperately needed,
while making that content expensive to optimize.
So we ended the year with hyper-training allowing players to fix 4Vs, a massive level cap increase to 80, and the ability to fuse powerful legendary Pokémon. This is the very definition of power creep in a live service game.
It is. The competitive meta has shifted drastically to accommodate level 50 shadow Pokémon, fusion Pokémon like Black and White Kyurem, and powerful max moves. The ceiling for competitive play has never been higher, and the cost to reach it has never been steeper.
Which brings us to our final thought.
So here is the provocative thought for you to take into 2026. Now that the game has given trainers all the tools for competitive optimization, PI fixing, endless leveling, max battles, what's the inevitable next step for Power?
Where do they go from here?
Are we heading toward a world where Mega Mewtwo will finally arrive and instantly reset the competitive meta once again, making every max battle team we just invested in obsolete? That seems to be the logical conclusion of the path laid out in this transformative year.
A Mega Mewtwo meta reset. That is a terrifying and incredibly exciting thought for the new year. Thank you for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.
We hope this comprehensive review of 2025 gives you clarity on the dramatic changes this year brought. Until next time, keep exploring the world around you and happy catching.